Good morning. My name is Ronan and I'm going to be going over some of the basic features of AirMagnet Surveyor Solutions software. We're going to do the survey section, display section, reports, and I'll touch up on simulation a little bit. Alright, let's go ahead and get started with the new project. This is going to be called IntelliSpring. This is a company that we're going to be doing today. We do need to have a layout of the project, something that either has the hallways and the offices. If you don't have a blueprint, a fire escape plan is a good substitute. I already have one selected. The layout has to be in a specific format. For instance, if it's a PDF file, you're going to have to change it before you can import it. These are the available formats that you can use. One easy way is to open the PDF, for instance, and get a snipping tool to convert it into either a PNG file or a JPEG file. After you import it, we are going to use a restricted close office. The only time you use a open space is for if it's like a warehouse where there are no walls, or if it's an open field like a state park, then you could use as the open space. Finish. Next, we need to calibrate. I already went ahead and took some measurements. We do want to recalibrate the image after we input the measurements. I'll show you when you don't need to calibrate the image. Let me zoom out a little bit. So the measurements that I took was from this wall in a straight line all the way to this wall, and that measurement came out to about 100. So let's change that to 100. Recalibrate. Okay. Now the X and the Y coordinates have been automatically adjusted. So right now this map is of 137 feet by 140 feet. If you want to double check, you can use the measuring tool. And if you made a mistake entering those numbers, you can click on the measuring tool, say yes to recalibrate, or no just to double check. So for instance, from this wall to this wall is about 62 feet, which is pretty close to what the actual measurement is. Next, we're ready to start the survey, which we would be clicking on this button here. To start the survey, let me go ahead and turn off the measuring tool. There's a couple of rules you have to follow when gathering the data. First off, it depends on whether you're going to be designing a new wireless network for that building, or if you're just surveying an existing wireless network. The one we're going to be doing right now is an existing. The access point is located right around here in the center of this office. If you were designing, then at this point you would have your demo access points connected and powered up before you start the survey. When you start the survey, you're going to hear the program making beeps every minute. What that is doing is collecting data automatically every second. So because of that, there's a few rules you have to follow. The first rule is if you change in velocity, in other words, if you start moving or you stop moving or you're stopped for a long time, you need to click and let the program know where you are located. The rule number 2 is if you change in directions, if you're moving in a straight line and then you change directions, you need to click where you are so the program knows where that information is. I'm going to do a very quick demonstration. I'm not actually going to walk around just to show what that looks like. And the rule number 3 is you really need to walk on the same location twice, coming from each direction. And I'll show what that looks like. All right, so starting from this corner. As you can hear, the program is collecting data every single second. So if we were walking this way, you need to walk in a steady, slow speed and maintain that speed until you get to the next location. You cannot go too fast and you can't start and stop which is your change in acceleration, your velocity. When you get to this point, you click, and then you would turn. When you get to this point, you would click and turn. And you just repeat that on and on and on. You'd go through this doorway. Every time you change in directions, you have to click. Change directions. Change directions. Let's say when you got to right about this point, somebody wanted to ask you a couple of questions. You need to click to signify that you stopped. Now you can just pause here and answer any questions they may have, whether you're looking for cell phone signals, whether you're looking for bombs, you hear all sorts of conversations. But the important part for you is you need to click before you start going to the next point, because you're changing your velocity from 0 to motion. If you don't click, and I'll show you what that looks like, I'm going to click over here. If you don't click, and let's say that your next stop was over here, you can see that all those blue lines is data that was gathered from this point where you stopped. But because you never clicked here, it's going to show you basically bad information. So what you can do there is a retract button. When you click it, it's going to pause the survey. It's going to retract. You can retract twice if you need to. Then you have to physically walk to the last good known location, click, and then continue from that point. So click and do your walk around. Notice that I'm going back over the steps that I've done. And the reason for this, and I'll explain in just a second. Alright, so let's say this was the complete survey. I'm going to go ahead and pause and stop. We would save and display. So the reason we have to walk over the same location twice, going from each direction, is because there's a lag in the data that is gathering versus when you're telling where the data is coming from. If you don't walk back and forth, all the data is going to be lagging in one direction, but once you walk backwards, it averages out both samples and gives you a much more precise number. Okay, now from this location, where am I? Let's put this measuring tool here. We do not want to recalibrate. So let's say you're located here at this point at the green dot. The signal averages out for a distance to either side, and this distance would change depending on the scale of the map. Notice that from this point here to here, there is no data gathered. So if however large the place is, you may have to actually go zigzag one direction, come down, do another path, come down, do another path, to make sure you get data from the entire area. Let me go ahead and come back to survey, because there's one thing that I forgot to mention. Before you click start the survey, there's a few things you need to double check. Make sure you're getting good data, which is going to be the survey type needs to be on passive. It could be on active. Active requires for you to actually put in the credentials to log into the specific access point. This is if you're determining one very specific access point, if it has any issues. For the most part, you can get the same information from passive, so leave it on passive. You could choose the specific SSID that you want, but for the same reasons, if you just leave it on any, you'll collect them all, and then you can narrow it down exactly to which one that you want. That's all the information from the survey section. Next, let's look into display. Okay, now that we're in display, you can notice on the bottom left corner, this are the channels which signals have come through. If you click on the SSID at the very bottom left, you'll switch to the SSIDs of each individual access point that was picked up during the survey. Notice that both on this version, both 2.4 and 5.0 were picked up. Next, we want to filter down to pick up exactly what we want. So filter. The ones we want are from IntelliSprings. I'm going to sort by SSID and scroll down to IntelliSprings. Here there are 4 signals. This building actually only has 1 access point. All of these 4 signals are coming from 1 access point. You can tell this by the MAC address. If all of them are mostly the same, it's an easy giveaway that it's coming from 1. I'm going to rename this so it's easy to find, especially when you have much bigger surveys that you're doing. I'm going to call these APs. So now I'm narrowed down to both channel 11 and 165. If I switch back to SSIDs, I'm now seeing both internal and guest. Because I know there's only 1 access point, I really only need 1 from the 2.4 gigahertz and 1 from the 5 gigahertz. So I'm going to expand these 2 and pick the one that looks the best, that has the best data gathering. As you can see, all of them pretty much look the same because I didn't actually go and walk around. When we actually do the walk around, you'll see the difference. So at this point, I would go filter and go deeper into 1 from 2.4 and 1 from 5. I am going to stick with the internal instead of guest since they're identical. I'm going to rename this 2.4. I'm going to go back to APs by clicking on the dot next to the previous filter that we did. Filter again, get a internal 5.0 gigahertz, rename this to 5. So now I have both 1 version of the 2.4 and 1 version of the 5.0. I believe that is all for display. Actually, there's one more thing. So the next step that you want to do is expand the channel or the SSID, doesn't really matter which one, and you will see that you should be left with just the 1 access point. If you were doing 10 access points in this building, then at this point you should have 10 access points in this filtered list. What you're going to do next is drag the access point, drop it where it's actually physically located, right click on it, go to properties, name it, because currently this name is very vague, and on a report we want to be very specific to what is it that we surveyed. This is access point 1. And we want to turn on power settings. Power settings essentially converts, you'll see it, it converts the data gathering and scales. If that was an access point, then that should be the strongest point, and it will scale out, diminishing to give a very good indication of where the access point is located. On the right corner here, you can see the scale and strength, where 0 is the highest strength. 99% of the times you're going to see a -20, even if you're directly underneath the access point, scaling down all the way to -100. For the most part, -86 is where we actually is the cutoff range. Depending on your customer, some want to cut off at 70. Visually, you can see that we don't even have any yellows, so the worst signal here is going to be around -56. What should be around here, well within the range, which is good enough. This comes in play when you have a much bigger building and multiple access points. You're going to ensure good coverage. I'll be displaying how this comes into play on the next section, on a later section. I'm going to skip simulation for now. I have a much better example that we can use for simulation. Next will be report. Let's go to report. I've already created a IntelliSpring passive report, and this is going to be using. I'll show you what templates it is using just for your reference. You don't need to do this part. So the only information that we need is going to be the signal distribution, signal noise distribution, and a maximum predictive PHY data rate downlink distribution. Okay, now depending which version of AirMagnet you'll be using, there are many different bugs. The latest 9.1 has corrected the most bugs, but there's still some bugs that are affecting the simulation section. So I'm not going to, I'm going to skip those bugs, but here's one that already came up. Notice that the landscape button is currently selected. If I were to double click on IntelliSpring passive report, the report would come out in landscape, which I don't want. So the way to correct this is highlight the report you want, because you have several, and then just click once to unselect the landscape. Now the report's running. It's going to take a good 5 to 10 minutes depending on how fast your CPU is. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here until it's complete. Alright, now that the report has completed, we need to save it. This button here will allow you to export. We want to use something other than PDF. Word editable RTF format allows us to easily copy the images from the report so we can put it into our custom report. Yes for all pages. And location, we're going to be saving this under IntelliSprings. Here's fine. This is going to be the 2.4 gigahertz report. Yes for all pages. Now we're going to go back to display. Actually, I saved that wrong. That was the 5 gigahertz, which is fine. We're going to go to the other one. Then we'll go back to reports. Notice this time the layout button is unselected. So in that case, all I need to do is double click on the report that I want, and it's going to run. The second and third and fourth report will go much faster, probably take about 15 seconds or so instead of the original 5 minutes or so. So here it is, it's already done. We're going to export this one as well. Change the format to Word Editable RTF. Yes for all pages. Let me go ahead and rename this one because that was incorrect. That was the 5 gigahertz, and now I'm saving the 2.4 gigahertz. And that's it. Let me go ahead and pull up a new, actually let's go ahead and save this project, which I did not do. And we're going to close it and open a demo for simulation.